So I've been home bartending and making cocktails for nearly 6 years now. And that's something that all of my friends and family know about me. And mainly that's because a lot of them have had some of my cocktails because they've been to my parties and they've been to my get-togethers. And quite a few of them are actually like you guys because they're also interested in making cocktails. They're interested in learning home bartending. And a very common question that I get asked, I would say time and time again, is what should be the first cocktail that I get started with? What should be the first cocktail that I learn how to make? And in this video, I'm covering the exact answer to that question. And really, I think there are two schools of thought about how you can exactly answer that question. And let's just get right into it. The first school of thought is that you should just pick whatever your favorite cocktail is and just have that be the first cocktail that you make. This is actually the approach that I took because all the way back in June 2020, when I made my first cocktail, I like to tell people that I don't really have a favorite cocktail. It's a very common, that's probably the most common question that I get asked when I tell people that I'm into home bartending. They ask me, what's your favorite cocktail to make, or what's your favorite cocktail to drink? I don't really have a favorite cocktail these days because I just have a very broad palette. I like a wide variety of different cocktails of all different core spirits and different eras and different flavor profiles and all those different things. But I would say back in June 2020, maybe not my favorite cocktail, but a cocktail that I really liked at that time was a Negroni. And that was a cocktail that I ended up making as my very first cocktail, and this is a cocktail that really led me down on this journey. I think going with a cocktail that you like is a great option for your first cocktail because it's a cocktail that you're enthusiastic about. It's a cocktail that, it doesn't seem like work when you watch videos on that cocktail, when you read books about that cocktail, when you read recipes online about that cocktail, when you go to the liquor store or the grocery store to buy ingredients for that cocktail. And finally, when you make the cocktail for the very first time, it's not going to seem like work at all because you are really looking forward to that end product. You love this cocktail. You enjoy this cocktail. You can't wait to taste the cocktail that you made because it's a cocktail that you really enjoy. And that's how I felt about the Negroni at that time, all the way back in June 2020. I still love the Negroni. I still think it's a great cocktail. But at that specific time, it was really a cocktail that I really enjoyed at that time. So I was enthusiastic about it. For me, it wasn't any work at all to, go buy the ingredients for that, to learn the recipe online, to watch YouTube videos about how to make the cocktail. All those different things. For me, that was not really work at all. It may have been for certain other cocktails, but definitely for the Negroni, because that was my favorite cocktail at that specific time. It was really no work at all to go out and make the Negroni. And I think it's very important to pick a cocktail that you enjoy and to make it seem like not that much work at all. This is true not just with home bartending, but when you're trying to learn any new skill or trying to adopt any new habit, you want to remove as much friction as possible, because when you do so, that allows you to build that momentum. And for me, that momentum has carried me nearly 6 years now. And during that time, I've learned probably close to like 150 plus recipes right by now. I've hosted 50 to 60 cocktail parties, and I've made thousands of drinks for hundreds of people. And now I've been on YouTube for nearly a year, and I made 125 videos about cocktails, about home bartending, all those different things. And all of that started with me making that very first cocktail, that Negroni, all the way back in June 2020. It's all led me to this point here. And it's very important to get that momentum started, to remove as much friction as possible and just make that first cocktail. And that's going to be a lot easier if it's a cocktail that you love, a cocktail that you enjoy, and a cocktail that you can't wait to make and can't wait to taste and can't wait to serve it to others. When you have all those things going for you, when you have that enthusiasm and love and passion for a cocktail, it's going to be so much easier for that to be your first cocktail, for you to just go out and make that cocktail. So that's going to be the first school of thought. And the second school of thought is really exemplified by this list here. And this is for people who, you don't have a favorite cocktail, or you just don't know enough about cocktails. I was a complete beginner to this. I had never worked in a bar, none of those things. I'm a full-time medical doctor. I never worked in a bar, never took any classes on bartending, and never took any classes on cocktail making, anything like that. So I didn't really know about a lot of cocktails. The reason the Negroni was so well liked by me at that time was because it was my older brother's favorite cocktail. He's somebody that I'm very close with. So because of that, I thought that's why I ended up liking the Negroni, because he liked the Negroni. So whenever I went to like his place or whenever we went to bars together, I would get the Negroni. So that's why I ended up liking the Negroni. But if you're like me, you may not have as much experience with cocktails. You may not know what exactly is your favorite cocktail. You may not know what flavor profiles you like and things like that. So for you, I would say if you're like that and you don't have a favorite cocktail, just pick one of the cocktails on this list. All 5 of these cocktails, the Old Fashioned, the Martini, the Daiquri, the Margarita, and the Moscow Mule, all 5 are amazing cocktails, and all 5 have a few different things going for them. The first is that all 5 of these are classic cocktails. So classic cocktails are cocktails from pre-1950, and the majority of these are not just 75 years old. A lot of these are 100, 125, or even in some cases like closer to 150 years old. These are all from the late 1800s and early 1900s. And not only were they drinks from that era, even now in the year 2026, all 5 of these drinks, old-fashioned, Martini, Daiquri, Margarita, and Moscow Mule, all 5 are extremely popular even in today's era. These are 5 of the most well-known drinks and most popular drinks even in today's era in the United States, Canada, Europe, and all other parts of the Western world, all parts of the world in general. These 5 cocktails are still extremely important. There's something called the Lindy effect, and this really applies to non-living things like, concepts, ideas, books, or in this case, recipes. The Lindy effect is really the opposite when it comes to living things. When living things have been around for a long time, that means they're not going to live that long. Humans, plants, animals, for example. But for concepts, ideas, recipes, if they've been around for a long time, that means they're still going to be around for a very long time. So if you're getting, this is especially true if you're getting into this hobby at a very young age. I got into this when I was 27. So if you're like me, getting into this in your 20s or 30s, or even if you are getting into this hobby later in life, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, something like that, I think the Lindy effect is still important for classic cocktails because these are cocktails that are not just going to be popular now in the year 2026. I can almost guarantee that all 5 of these cocktails, because they've lasted for so long, they're still going to last for a very long time. People are still going to be enjoying old fashions in 2050. People are still going to be loving margaritas in 2075. And I can honestly say that all 5 of these cocktails, they're really going to be extremely popular and extremely well liked long after I'm dead and gone. Because they've been around for so long, they're still going to be around for a very long time. I can't necessarily say that about the cocktails that came about in the 1980s or the 2000s or even now in the 2020s. I don't know if those cocktails will still be drank in 2030, 2040, 2050, 2060, something like that. But I can honestly say that all 5 of these cocktails, they'll be enjoyed for the rest of my life by a huge variety of different people, a huge population of people. Not only for the rest of my life, but even after I'm long dead and gone, people will still be enjoying all 5 of these cocktails. They're classic cocktails for a reason. They stood the test of time. So these are all great options for your first cocktail. I recently made a video going over all 5 of these cocktails. Links to my specific videos where I do tutorials on all 5 of them will be in the description below. But really all 5 of these are extremely important. I think they're all essential to learn in your first 6 months of as a home bartender. So whatever your first cocktail is, I think all 5 of these are essential learning in your first 6 months as a home bartender. So why not make one of them your very first cocktail that you learn? Another reason all 5 of these are important are because they all are in different categories. So if you learn, I think of these really as like fundamental, foundational template cocktails. So if you learn these, they set up a template that you can then apply to another cocktail. For example, if you learn the Martini, you can then take that template of the Martini and then apply it to something like the Manhattan or the Negroni. If you learn the Daiquiri, you can take that template and then apply it to something else, similar cocktail like a gin gimlet or a whiskey sour, for example. If you take the template of a Margarita, you can then apply that and you have a similar recipe, a similar template, a similar foundation for when you're making cocktails like the Bramble or the Sidecar, for example. So all 5 of these are really core, root, template, foundational, fundamental cocktails, whatever term you want to use. All 5 of these fit in those categories. And like I said, they're all essential learning, in my opinion, for your first 6 months as a home bartender. So why not make one of them your very first cocktail that you learn? So all of these are great options for those different reasons. Extremely popular, classic cocktails, stood the test of time, root, foundational, fundamental cocktails, essential knowledge for any beginner home bartender within their first year, definitely within even their, I would say even first 6 months as a home bartender. Just make one of them your first cocktail. So just to summarize what we talked about in this video, if you're like a lot of my friends and family and you're interested in home bartending, but maybe you haven't made your first cocktail yet, or maybe you've only made a few cocktails, something like that, and you're wondering what should be the next cocktail that you make, what should be the first cocktail that you make, I have 2 schools of thought. The first is to, just pick whatever your favorite cocktail is. If you really love an espresso martini, you really love the Bramble, you really love a mojito, you love the Mai Tai, whatever the case may be, if you love one of these iconic cocktails, one of these extremely popular cocktails, just have that be the first cocktail that you make. Watch my video or somebody else's video on that cocktail, read about the recipe online, maybe read a book about the cocktail, go out to the liquor store, buy the ingredients for that cocktail, then just put it all together, make that cocktail, enjoy that cocktail, serve that cocktail to other people, and because you have that inherent enthusiasm, that passion, that love for that cocktail, it's going to be so much easier to remove the friction and just get started as soon as possible and build that momentum that, if you're like me, it'll carry you many years down the road, many cocktails later, many cocktail parties later, many great memories and friendships and things like that later. So get started, just pick whatever your favorite cocktail is. If you don't have a favorite cocktail, or you don't know enough about cocktails to have a favorite cocktail, you don't know what your taste preferences are, you don't know what type of cocktails you're going to be making, just pick one of the cocktails on this list. You can't really go wrong with any of these 5. Pick the old-fashioned, Martini, Daiquri, the Margarita, or the Moscow Mule. I've made videos on all 5 of these cocktails. All those videos will be linked in the description below. These are classic, fundamental, foundational cocktails, stood the test of time, extremely popular even now in 2026. And you can't really go wrong with learning these, because if you learn these open the door up. Each of these 5 cocktails opens the door up to a whole world of other cocktails within that same family. So you really can't go wrong with any of these 5 cocktails if you don't know what your first cocktail is going to be. If you don't have a favorite cocktail, pick one of these. If you have a favorite cocktail, just pick that as your first cocktail. So if you're wondering what your first cocktail should be, either pick your favorite cocktail or just pick one of the 5 cocktails on this list: old-fashioned, Martini, Daiquiri, Margarita, or the Moscow Mule. Anyways, that's all I have for this video. I hope you found the advice helpful. If you did, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. I like to do 2 styles of videos on this channel. The first will be a tutorial style video where I show you guys how to make a specific cocktail. And the second style video will be like this one, where it's more talking head style. I give general advice about home bartending, answer questions about home bartending, share tips and tricks, share stories from my own journey and things like that I hope will help you guys become better home bartenders. And finally, if you really want to take this hobby more seriously, you want to invest money into learning home bartending, I actually have a paid community on school.com. That'll be the first link in the description below. Thank you. Cheers.